Ethan walked home under the dim glow of the city streetlights. The night was quiet, the usual hum of traffic and chatter long gone. He liked these moments, the calm, the stillness, but tonight something felt different. As he turned a corner into a narrow alley, a soft, trembling sound reached his ears. It wasn't loud, just a faint whimper, but it pulled him forward, curiosity mixed with concern. Following the sound, Ethan's eyes adjusted to the shadows. There, huddled against a dumpster, was a small figure. At first he thought it was a cat, shivering and wounded, but then he noticed something impossible. The figure had delicate human features, yet her ears were pointed and covered in soft fur. Her golden eyes reflected the streetlight as they widened in fear. Her leg was scraped and bleeding, and she trembled violently. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Oh no, hey, it's okay," he whispered gently, stepping closer. The girl, or creature, flinched, her tail twitching nervously. Her small, trembling hands clutched at her chest as if to protect herself. She looked scared, lost and alone, and something inside Ethan tightened. He couldn't leave her here. Not like this. Slowly, he knelt beside her. "I won't hurt you, I want to help," he said softly. Her ears flicked and she hissed faintly a warning, but there was no real aggression, just fear. Ethan extended his hand carefully, palm open. The Catgirl stared for a long moment, her golden eyes scanning his face, reading him, judging him. Then, ever so slowly, she let him touch her hand. Her paw-like fingers were cold and trembling. "Okay, come with me," Ethan murmured. He scooped her up gently, careful not to press on her injured leg. She buried her face into his chest, her soft fur brushing against his shirt. A quiet, almost imperceptible purr escaped her lips, surprising him. He smiled, even though his heart ached at her condition. She was small, fragile, and in pain, yet there was a spark in her eyes, a will to survive that made Ethan's chest tighten with admiration. Carrying her through the empty streets, Ethan felt a strange mix of fear and protectiveness. He had no idea where she had come from, what she was, or if anyone would come looking for her. All he knew was that she needed him, and he couldn't turn away. Her soft weight in his arms, her ears flicking at every sound, and the occasional soft purr made him feel an odd kind of connection. By the time he reached his apartment, Ethan's arms were sore, and he was exhausted, but he didn't care. He gently laid her on his bed and grabbed his first aid kit. Cleaning her wound made him nervous. He had never treated injuries like this before, but he took his time. He talked to her quietly the entire time, telling her it would be okay, that she was safe now. She didn't speak, didn't even make a sound at first, but her golden eyes followed every move he made. When the bandage was finally in place, she let out a tiny sigh and curled into a small ball, her tail wrapping around herself. Ethan sat beside her, watching her carefully. "I think you need a name," he said softly. She looked up at him, blinking slowly. "I don't have one, do you?" Her voice was barely a whisper, melodic and soft, sending a strange warmth through his chest. "No, I guess you don't." "Then I'll call you Nia," he said with a gentle smile. Her ears twitched at the sound, and she pressed her face lightly against his hand, a small, trusting gesture that made Ethan's heart ache in a way he couldn't explain. That night, Ethan stayed awake longer than usual, listening to Nia's soft breathing. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or if she had anyone searching for her. But in that quiet room, with her safe and trusting in his care, he felt a strange but powerful bond forming. Something inside him whispered that this was only the beginning, that saving her wasn't just an act of kindness. It was the start of something much bigger. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of Ethan's apartment. Nia stirred on the bed, her golden eyes blinking sleepily. She stretched carefully, her tail flicking with caution, and for a moment Ethan just watched her. She was small and delicate, yet there was something wild and unbroken in her gaze that made him admire her even more. "Good morning, Nia," he said softly, trying not to startle her. She tilted her head, her ears twitching at the sound of his voice. Slowly she got up, wobbling slightly on her healed but tender leg. Ethan stepped forward, ready to help if she fell. "Take it slow. You're safe here," he added, a quiet reassurance that seemed to calm her. Nia's trust in him was growing, but it was fragile. She stayed close, following him as he went about simple chores in the apartment. She was quiet at first, her movements careful and deliberate, as if testing whether he would harm her. Every now and then, she would brush past his legs, a soft nuzzle against his hand. Ethan smiled, feeling a warmth he had not expected. It was a small connection, but it meant she was beginning to feel safe. After breakfast, Ethan realized that Naya would need more than just food and bandages. She needed a proper place where she could rest and recover without fear. Carefully, he set up a small area in his living room with blankets and pillows, forming a little nest for her. Naya inspected it with cautious curiosity, circling and sniffing before finally curling up in the center. She gave him a small look as if saying, "Is this mine?" Ethan nodded gently. "It's all yours, Naya. You can stay here as long as you need." As the day passed, Ethan tried to make her feel more comfortable. He talked softly, explaining simple things about his world, the lights, the furniture, the city beyond the walls. Nia listened, tilting her head at his words, her golden eyes filled with quiet wonder. Occasionally, she reached out to touch something he showed her, her small fingers brushing against objects as if discovering a new world. Every movement, every curious glance made Ethan feel a connection growing stronger between them. But trust was not a straight path. At times, Naya would flinch at sudden noises or dart away from his touch. Ethan never scolded her. Instead, he waited patiently, allowing her to come to him in her own time. He learned to understand the small signals, when her tail flicked, when her ears lowered, when her golden eyes softened, and he adjusted his approach. Slowly, she began to relax. By evening, she was following him around the apartment more confidently, occasionally brushing her head against his shoulder. Ethan laughed quietly, a sound of relief and happiness. "You're getting braver, aren't you?" he said. Naya responded with a soft purr, a tiny vibration that filled the room and warmed his heart. He realized then that she was not only healing physically, but also emotionally, and he was grateful to be part of that journey. As night fell, Nia curled up next to him on the couch, her head resting against his chest. He held her gently, feeling her steady breathing, and thought about how fragile yet strong she was. She had been alone, scared and wounded, yet here she was, trusting him enough to rest in his arms. Ethan whispered softly, "I promise I won't let anything happen to you. Yeah, you don't have to be afraid anymore." Her ears twitched, and she blinked slowly at him, her golden eyes reflecting the soft light of the room. In that quiet moment, Ethan felt a deep bond forming. He realized saving her was only the first step. What mattered now was protecting her, helping her heal, and learning from her resilience. Naya had entered his life unexpectedly, but she was already becoming a part of it. An unspoken promise of companionship, trust, and something deeper he could not yet name. Days passed, and Naya began to settle into Ethan's apartment. Each morning, she would peek out from her little nest, her golden eyes blinking at him as if measuring his mood. She had started following him around the small space, her tiny steps quiet and careful, but her curiosity was impossible to hide. Every time she explored a corner or examined a new object, Ethan watched her with fascination. There was a grace in her movements, a lightness in her step, and a quiet intelligence in the way she observed the world. Ethan noticed how cautious she still was. Loud noises, sudden movements, or even his own shadow would make her flinch. Yet slowly, she began to respond to him differently. When he approached gently, she would stay in place, sometimes even offering a small nuzzle of her hand against his. Her trust was no longer fragile. It was growing like a delicate vine climbing toward the sun, and Ethan felt honored to be the one she trusted. One afternoon, Ethan brought out a small toy he had bought from a store, a soft ball with a bell inside. He rolled it toward Naya, unsure if she would react. At first, she froze, ears twitching nervously, but the faint sound of the bell caught her attention and she pawed at it carefully. When it rolled away, she chased it, her tail swishing excitedly behind her. Ethan couldn't help but laugh softly, delighted at her simple joy. It was moments like these that reminded him how special she was. But Naya was not just playful. She was also observant. She watched Ethan as he worked at his computer, sometimes tilting her head in curiosity. She would mimic small actions he did, like stirring a cup of tea or adjusting a blanket. It was as if she was learning about him, learning about the life she had been brought into. And Ethan, in turn, began to learn about her. The little sounds she made when content, the way her ears twitched when worried, the subtle purrs that spoke volumes. Their evenings became the most comforting. After a long day, Nia would curl up against Ethan, resting her head on his lap while he read or listened to music. Her purring filled the quiet room, and Ethan often found himself staring at her in awe. She had been abandoned, wounded, and alone, yet she had the courage to trust again. Watching her slowly relax in his presence made him feel protective, proud, and deeply connected in ways he had never experienced before. Ethan realized that he was learning from Naya as much as she was learning from him. She reminded him of patience, of observing before acting, of finding joy in the simplest things. She had been through pain and fear, yet she carried a lightness, a resilience that inspired him. He began to understand that saving her was only part of the journey. Helping her heal, giving her a safe place, and simply being there mattered just as much. One night, as they sat together by the window watching the city lights flicker below, Naya's small hand found his. She pressed it gently against her chest, her golden eyes looking into his with quiet sincerity. Ethan swallowed hard, feeling a strange, warm emotion welling inside him. "I'll keep you safe, Naya, I promise," he whispered. She purred softly, the sound low and tender, and pressed closer. It was a silent conversation between them, a promise, an understanding, a bond that didn't need words. Ethan smiled as he held her, realizing that their lives had intertwined in ways he could never have expected. She was more than a creature he had rescued. She was a companion, a teacher, and a reminder of why compassion mattered. Nia's presence had changed the quiet rhythm of his life, filling it with warmth, care, and the kind of connection that felt rare and precious. And as she drifted off to sleep, her tiny form nestled against him, Ethan knew that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary. One rainy evening, as Ethan and Naya sat together in the living room, a sudden knock at the door made both of them startle. The sound was loud and deliberate, echoing through the small apartment. Naya's ears flattened against her head, and her tail swished nervously. She glanced at Ethan, her golden eyes wide with worry. Ethan walked cautiously to the door, his heart beating faster than usual. He peered through the peephole and saw a group of strangers standing outside. They weren't ordinary people. Their eyes were sharp, and their stance carried a threatening presence. One of them stepped forward, holding a small device that looked like it could detect something beyond normal human senses. "We know she's here," one of them said, his voice cold and commanding. "Return the property now." Ethan froze. "Property?" he repeated, his voice shaking with disbelief. He looked back at Naya. She was trembling, but there was a flicker of defiance in her eyes. Her small fists clenched and her tail lashed in agitation. "She's not property," Ethan said, his voice firm, though fear coiled in his chest. "She belongs to no one but herself." The strangers laughed, a sound that made the hairs on the back of Ethan's neck stand up. "You don't understand. She has value. She has a role. She is not free to choose." Ethan's fist tightened. He had protected Naya through her wounds, through fear and loneliness, and he could not, would not let anyone take her away. But the threat was real. He knew that confronting them directly could be dangerous. He glanced at Naya, who stepped forward slightly, her small form tense but unyielding. Her ears flattened further, and she let out a low, almost menacing hiss. Ethan had never heard her sound like that before, and it sent a shiver down his spine. He realized something in that moment. Naya was not just fragile or helpless. She had strength inside her, a will to fight for herself. The golden eyes staring at the intruders radiated courage, and Ethan felt a surge of admiration and protectiveness. "We're leaving," he said, pulling Naya gently toward him. "Now." The strangers moved quickly, blocking the hallway, but Naya reacted with unexpected agility. She leapt from Ethan's arms, landing lightly on the floor and darting past them with feline speed. She hissed and swiped at one of the intruders, her claws scraping against their clothing. Ethan followed, dodging the group and keeping close to her, ready to defend her if needed. They reached the fire escape and ran into the rain-soaked streets. Naya moved with incredible swiftness, her small body agile and determined. Ethan struggled to keep up, slipping slightly on the wet pavement, but he refused to let go of her. Every time he glanced at her, he saw not just fear but courage, the courage to fight for her freedom, the courage to trust him completely. Finally, they ducked into a narrow alley and hid behind some crates. Nya leaned against Ethan, panting lightly, her golden eyes scanning the street for danger. Ethan held her close, feeling the weight of both relief and worry. "It's okay. We're safe for now," he whispered. She pressed her head against his chest, a small purr escaping, and Ethan felt a strange mix of pride and love. He realized that saving Naya was no longer just about kindness or compassion. It was about protecting her in a world that didn't understand her, about standing up for someone who had no one else. And as the rain poured around them, Ethan promised silently that he would never let her face the world alone again. Nya, in turn, leaned into him, her small body trembling but her trust unwavering. Together they faced a danger that was bigger than either of them, yet their bond gave them strength. The rain had soaked them both, but Ethan didn't care. He held Nya close as they ran through the narrow streets, heart pounding with every step. The strangers who had come for her were close behind, their heavy boots splashing in puddles as they chased them relentlessly. Nya's small form darted ahead, her golden eyes alert and her ears flattened in focus. She moved with an agility that amazed Ethan, leaping over obstacles and squeezing through gaps in ways he could barely follow. "We need to keep going," Ethan shouted, struggling to keep up. Nya glanced back, her small hand brushing his as she passed. He grabbed it, pulling her safely along. Her claws occasionally scratched his palms, but he didn't mind. Every time he saw her determined expression, he felt a surge of admiration and protectiveness. They turned down a narrow alley and hid behind stacked crates, gasping for breath. Nya crouched low, her tail twitching nervously, but her eyes remained sharp. "Are they still following us?" she asked in a soft, melodic voice. Ethan nodded, wiping rainwater from his forehead. "Yes, but we can't stop now. We need somewhere safe." Nya took a deep breath, her ears twitching. "I can help," she whispered. Her small hands reached out, gripping the crates as she leapt onto a fire escape ladder. Ethan watched in awe as she moved effortlessly, scaling it like it was second nature. He followed more slowly, pulling himself up with effort. At the top, Nya waited, her golden eyes scanning the streets below. "This way," she said, pointing to a narrow passage leading to an abandoned warehouse she had spotted earlier. Ethan and Nya ran together through the dark, rain-slicked streets, ducking behind corners and slipping past alleys the pursuers hadn't noticed. Every step was tense, every breath shaky, but Nya never faltered. Her small hand sometimes brushed against his, sometimes pressed firmly into his arm, and each time he felt a connection that went beyond words. She trusted him, and he trusted her, and that trust gave them strength. Finally, they reached the warehouse. The door was heavy and old, but Ethan pushed it open while Nya slipped inside, her small form moving quickly to the shadows. Inside, the space was dark and empty, but it was enough. They were safe for now. Nya collapsed against Ethan, breathing heavily but with relief in her eyes. Ethan held her tightly, feeling her small body tremble against his chest. "We're safe," he whispered. "I've got you." Nya tilted her head, her ears flicking as she looked at him. "Thank you," she murmured softly, her voice barely above the sound of rain dripping through cracks in the roof. Ethan smiled, stroking her soft fur gently. "No, thank you, Nya, for trusting me, for being brave." She pressed her face into his chest, a soft purr vibrating against him. In that moment, Ethan realized that they had saved each other in ways they didn't fully understand. As the rain continued to fall outside, Ethan and Nya settled into the shadows of the warehouse. He inspected her leg to make sure it wasn't injured again, while she leaned against him, silent but alert. The chase had been terrifying, but it had shown him something he hadn't realized before. Nya was more than a fragile, wounded Catgirl. She was strong, courageous, and smart. She wasn't just surviving. She was fighting, and she was willing to fight with him. Ethan sat back against a crate, holding Nya in his lap as she curled against him. He whispered promises into her fur, vowing to keep her safe, to protect her from anyone who threatened her. Nya's golden eyes met his, filled with gratitude and trust. It was a bond forged in fear and danger, one that neither of them could break. And as the night stretched on, the rain outside forming a steady rhythm, Ethan knew that together they could face anything. The days after their escape were quiet, but full of small victories. Ethan had managed to find a safer apartment, a modest place to ached away from the busy streets where Nya could recover without fear. He set up a corner with soft blankets, pillows, and small toys to make her feel comfortable. Nya explored her new space cautiously, her golden eyes wide with curiosity, yet she always returned to Ethan's side. She had begun to understand that here, with him, she was safe. Ethan watched her carefully, noticing every small improvement. She moved more freely now, her steps confident, though careful. She would chase after little toys he made for her or peek out the window at the bustling city below, tail flicking with interest. Each day she grew stronger, her wounds healed, and her spirit returned. And with each improvement, Ethan felt a growing sense of pride and joy. Naya's personality began to show in full. She was playful, mischievous, and endlessly curious. She liked to follow Ethan around the apartment, brushing against his legs or leaping onto his shoulders when he least expected it. Sometimes she would hide behind doors or under tables, only to jump out suddenly, making him laugh in surprise. Her small melodic laughter and soft purrs filled the space, and Ethan found himself looking forward to every little interaction. Yet, beneath the playfulness, there was a quiet loyalty and affection that Naya showed only to him. She would curl up next to him while he cooked, resting her head on his arm, or sit silently beside him when he read late into the night. Ethan noticed the subtle way she communicated trust, touching his hand lightly, leaning into his shoulder, or looking up at him with her golden eyes full of quiet understanding. Every gesture made his chest tighten with emotion. One afternoon, as Ethan was reading a book, Naya climbed onto the couch beside him. She rested her head on his lap, her eyes half closed, and purred softly. Ethan reached down and stroked her ears gently. "You've come so far, Naya," he whispered, marveling at her growth. She looked up at him, her gaze soft and filled with gratitude, as if she understood every word. In that moment, he realized that their bond had grown into something deeper than trust. It was companionship, a silent promise to protect and support each other, no matter what. They began to share small routines. Ethan taught her about his world, books, music, simple cooking, and she showed him her own kind of wisdom. The way she observed, the way she noticed the smallest details amazed him. It was clear that despite her small size, she was incredibly perceptive. Ethan found himself learning patience, empathy, and joy from her in ways he hadn't expected. At night, they would sit together by the window, watching the city lights flicker. Naya would curl up against him, her tail wrapped around his arm, and Ethan would gently hold her, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing. The quiet moments were precious. In them, he realized that healing was not just about her wounds. It was about the heart and soul. They were healing together, teaching each other trust, love, and hope. Ethan smiled softly, brushing his fingers through her soft fur. "I'll never let anything happen to you, Nia," he whispered. She tilted her head, pressing against him in a quiet gesture of reassurance. It was a bond stronger than words, one forged in fear, danger, and recovery. And as she purred against his chest, Ethan understood that saving her had been only the beginning. She had not only recovered, but she had also changed his life, filling it with warmth, joy, and a connection that nothing could break. Months had passed since Ethan had first found Naya, wounded and alone in that dark alley. Their lives had slowly intertwined, each day building trust, love, and companionship. The bond between them was no longer fragile, it was unshakable, forged in danger, care, and shared quiet moments. Nia was no longer just a rescued Catgirl. She had become family, a constant presence that filled Ethan's world with warmth and meaning. One evening, Ethan led Naya to the rooftop of their apartment building. The city stretched below them, a sea of lights shimmering like stars scattered across the earth. The wind rustled Naya's fur, her ears twitching with delight. She leapt lightly onto the railing, balancing gracefully, her golden eyes sparkling as she looked out over the horizon. Ethan stood behind her, hands ready to catch her if she slipped. Yet he found himself trusting her balance, her instincts, and her courage. "You're amazing," he said softly, his voice carrying in the quiet night. Nia turned, her gaze meeting his, and for a moment silence passed between them, a shared understanding that needed no words. She nudged his hand gently, pressing against him, a silent affirmation of the bond they had nurtured. The world outside could be harsh, unforgiving, and full of danger, but in that moment, it didn't matter. They had each other, and that was enough. Naya leapt down from the railing and curled against Ethan's side, her tail wrapping around his arm. Her soft purrs resonated against him, a sound full of trust, gratitude, and quiet happiness. Ethan wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "I'm not leaving," Naya whispered, her voice soft but firm. Ethan smiled, brushing his fingers through her fur. "I wouldn't want you to," he replied. There was no need for more words. In that moment, all that mattered was the silent promise between them, to protect, to trust, and to never let go. Ethan looked out at the city, reflecting on how much had changed. He had found Naya by chance, yet saving her had become the most important thing he had ever done. And in return, she had saved him from loneliness, from fear, and from a life that lacked connection. She had shown him courage, joy, and resilience in ways that no one else could. Together they had faced danger, healed wounds, and built a home in each other's presence. As night deepened, they returned inside, moving quietly so as not to disturb the peaceful apartment. Naya followed closely, her small hand brushing against Ethan's leg, her trust evident in every movement. She curled up on the couch, head resting in his lap as he read quietly. The soft sound of her breathing and her gentle purrs filled the room, creating a sense of calm and contentment that Ethan had never known before. He gently stroked her ears, marveling at how far they had come. "We're okay now," he whispered. "No one can take you away. No one can hurt you. This is our life together." Naya tilted her head, golden eyes shining with emotion, and pressed closer. In her small, delicate body, Ethan felt strength, courage, and a love that transcended words. And as they sat together in the soft light of their home, Ethan understood something profound. Saving someone was not always about heroism in the grand sense. Sometimes it was about compassion, patience, and unwavering care. Sometimes it was about being there day after day in small acts of kindness. And sometimes saving someone changed the saver in ways nothing else could. Nia purred softly, her warm body pressed against him, and Ethan smiled. Together they had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty. Together they had healed, grown, and learned to trust completely. And as the city slept below, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side, bound by choice, loyalty, and a love forged in the quiet bravery of one human who refused to turn away, and one Catgirl who refused to be afraid. It was not just a new chapter, it was a new beginning. And for Ethan and Naya, it was the start of a life full of trust, love, and endless possibilities.